Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good part of the day, folks. Everyone, welcome to the largest, fastest growing, and the most active large-scale Scrum meetup. Having been born in New York City, having gone global over the last couple of years, I would like to welcome you all, and most importantly, I would like to welcome today's special guest, Jon Kern. I'll spend a few minutes introducing Jon, and then I'll pass the baton over to him. So Jon is the one of very few people that actually were there originally when the Agile Manifesto was written. He's one of the co-authors of the manifesto back in 2001 in Snowbird, Utah. Jon is a software engineer by heart and by profession. He has done a variety of things over his life, over his career, serving various companies, various organizations. And could you please mute yourself? And Jon's motto is really to help companies with business success and organizational overall adaptiveness. Jon also is, on the side, I think Jon is also, I'm not sure if it's a philanthropy or just side work, but he has been doing some great service to the firefighters of his, of his local neighborhood, and has written some SaaS web apps starting from 2006. A whole gamut of technologies that he's familiar with. So without any further ado, Jon, if you don't mind, I'll just pass it over to you and take it away. Folks, keep your mics off, cameras on, use the chat window to exchange professionally and perhaps ask questions if you have any. Jon, over to you.
Thank you, Gene. Yeah, it's really my pleasure. I attended some of your presentations in the past, so I'm always impressed with the group that you have. And I really want this to be for all of your folks. So I'm going to kind of randomly touch on some things that are near and dear to my heart that I think are important for software development, but ask you to, contribute with some questions and things like that. So if anything pops up, jot it down and we'll have an opportunity. I'll try to go through my bit fast so that we can get to your bit, which hopefully provides you more value to hear things that you're interested in than me guessing what you might be interested in. But I think that, to me, I see a lot of what I might call premature scaling. I like to sort of joke. It might sound harsher than I am in real life, but if you can't figure out how to do Agile in a small scaling, it's not going to get any better. So, as I mentioned, I'll probably do under 30 minutes just of how I think about pragmatic Agile. So please think of questions that you want to know about. And Gene touched it a little bit. I started as an aerospace engineer and kind of discovered software that did cool things like show different data on test environment screens and things like that. So I normally don't put a slide like this up here, but just so you understand, I've had a kind of a wide and varied career that went from crazy things like centrifuge testing and putting F-14 pilots through flat spins, working on the aerodynamic flight simulation model. So I really morphed into learning software from some actual professional software developers. I was trained in aerospace engineering, only had a couple of really silly software courses back in the day, but self-taught and really got onto the object-oriented wagon. Peter Code was a longtime mentor. I started working with him in the early 90s. We ended up co-founding TogetherSoft in 2000. That exploded onto the scene and we kicked ass. It was a desktop UML modeling tool for software developers. And because of my association with Peter and I was able to be part of the gathering that I will say, we did not expect it to have the impact that it did. And I went on to be involved with some other tools and doing, along with my own company, doing a few startups. And yes, that firefighting app, it is sort of my pro bono work. It actually is across the United States, up into Canada. And it's serious production app. And so I do write code every week, deploy to production. Luckily, it's easier being a one-man band than it is sometimes working with 50 of my closest friends. And since 2019, I've been here at Adaptivist and really working with teams all across the world. And one of the funny things I like to take from Office Space and use with our clients is really trying to understand what is the purpose, like why are we here? Like that's one thing I love about the firefighting app. I work with actual firefighters. We have kind of a what you might call a panel of trusted advisors that we work on new features, new ideas, and really understanding what their needs are in the field. And to me, delivering smiles on customers' faces because you're delivering something that's valuable to them, that helps them, that's really the key. But not everyone understands that, especially I think the bigger the larger the team, the bigger the product, maybe the less chances there are that you understand things beyond the little part that you're working on. So that being said, in places where I've seen what I would call premature scaling happen, there's a lot of activity that sometimes is, mistaken for progress. And I'd like to talk a little bit about how I think there are other approaches and really it's simple. Hopefully these things resonate. That's not rocket science. And I will say this is recursive. I'll show this in a slightly different way as well, but it all starts with the flag in the distance. Whether it's a product I'm building, a major feature set, or even a feature, what's that flag in the distance? What outcome are we looking for? What's the vision? And how you actually gather requirements. Many times, I know I saw some tweets just recently from Alan Holub about giant backlogs or terrible and things like that. To me, it's all about the priority. What's the smallest thing you can do to understand the requirements? From those requirements, I build models. So this harkens back to how did I even get involved early on with Peter code and object modeling, and a tool that allowed the models and the code to be one and the same. It's all about building up just enough information to kind of take the next step. Similarly, some systems, as I mentioned, I worked on a real-time man-in-the-loop flight simulation that ran on a 50-foot centrifuge that could put 15 Gs per second on a human body. That's a lot different than a simple web app that might be for fun. So what architecture do you need, and how do you design it? And that's really, in my mind, a lot of flaws that I see in large systems is you can just tell they're poorly designed, they're poorly architected, such that there's a lot of excess energy spent overcoming poor architecture. So you need more teams. It's harder to do stuff. You're stepping on each other's toes. So getting the architecture right is really key. And then, I like to think of you have the features and the requirements, you've got an architecture, and how do you consistently build out features so that you don't have a lot of variation with people's opinions. And of course, always be shipping. So that means early on, you're able to build a stack, make sure you can get things out the door, feature flippers. So it's this really holistic view of how you take that fuzzy product idea and get it built and delivered. And along the way, it's, in my mind, really key to collaborate, not just cooperate, but working with the customer has been my secret to success. And understanding a lot of what we do is risk mitigation as you go from the product idea to some design to actually do. And I'm a big nut about behavior-driven development and test-driven development. I don't, I'm not in favor of test after, or throwing the code over the wall to somebody else to see if it works. So there's a lot that goes into kind of what I think is important. If you get this down really well, scaling it becomes a fairly simple exercise in that you can break the design into components. You can use basically design by interface. Right? There's lots of ways to allow the teams to move fast. Systems that have tons of dependencies are the worst, and I'm sure you've probably have worked on some of those. I also like to say be lazy. You might be shocked at how small I can build a feature for a client, even though I know it's like stupidly small, and we've actually talked about a few more steps along the way. Nonetheless, get something running, get it. And this is contingent on having feature flippers, being able to shield it from the rest of the folks using your system. So there's a lot of things that go into making this easy, but it's really critical to do what I even like to say, slightly less than you might be comfortable. And this is hard. I guarantee you most of your product owners are, like, people love to think of the complete thing. They have a giant UX design, all kinds of stuff. But the real key is to do a small amount, because you can always add more. You can never take away time that you've spent or overspent on something. So this is super key. And then part of my journey from kind of a process point of view, I started with Defense Department, DoD, Mil Standard 2167, which, plus doing bid and proposals, fixed price, 1-year contracts, like stupid things that are for doing research and development. So it's not like we're even know exactly what we're delivering. It's experimental, it's research, it's feedback, it's, take a different tack based on what you find. So how in God's name can that possibly be done in a fixed price, fixed statement of work? So that lunacy as a taxpayer led me to very quickly develop a more iterative, agile approach to doing software before it was known as Agile. Although I had been doing work on Agile fighter maneuverability prior to 2001. So how you might approach, I know Scrum, less, safe, a lot of people use Kanban, and then there's something that you might think of as a blend, an adaptive approach is one that is much less cookie cutter. So where are you on the spectrum? As a team, as an organization, it's important to constantly try to move and get better. And the one way that I like to just simplify Agile is mind the gap. And I mean the gap between taking an action and getting a reaction, whether it's building a feature, building a product, because building a whole product to get a reaction is expensive. But how can you shorten the time between taking a step and realizing, is it going in the right direction? So that's a real key to thinking, simplifying Agile, just mind the gap. So if you have a chance to think about what have been some, or what are some of your current options, you can toss them in the chat. Feel free to kind of queue them up so that we have something to discuss as I go through a little bit more here. Oops. So I don't know how many of you have gotten into reading stuff about lean, but our son works in medical device manufacturing. I actually want to, think I want to change jobs and move into machining because it's so tangible. Like a feature could be something that gets cut on a piece of metal, and you can actually hold the features in your hand, and it's even knowable. Tool paths and cutting speeds, and to me, it's like, wow, this would be so much fun to work in a slightly more hardware, even though I hate hardware from a computer point of view. I'd rather do software. But in manufacturing, there's some really amazing things you can learn that really apply to what we do in software. So I encourage you, we'll send a PDF out, but a fun book that my son had it's called 2 Second Lean. And some really interesting things that if you haven't had the chance to just poke a little bit at lean, I recommend it. And of course, the Mary and Tom, Pop and Dick in lean and software, waste. I always say you don't add quality at the end. You also don't add performance at the end. So there's a lot of things that I'm a nut. If I showed you the wiki, I'm a crazy man when it comes to building a shared knowledge base. That's so crucial to helping teams go fast. And as I mentioned earlier, being able to deliver fast is based on a holistic view, not only being able to hit the deploy button, but ways to have feature toggles and things like that allow you to iterate very quickly. And of course, a little later on, I'll talk about the people side of things. And what I've learned these past few years working with a colleague of mine named Jon Kern, an adaptivist, who's really filled in some missing pieces for me that have been crucial. So yes, we were gathered at a fun spot, if you like skiing. So quite a few of us enjoyed skiing, and some just walked and some just stayed at the bar. But it was an amazing gathering where I like to say we left our egos at the door. I was a youngster, a lot of famous people in the room, people have written books. I think I had only written something in a Lotus Notes book for some reason about Agile before it was called Agile. So, but I was very vocal when it came to talking about the things that were near and dear to my heart due to the Defense Department work. And being humble is certainly one of the strengths, just like being lazy. Easier said than done. Being humble, easier said than done. Yeah, of course, I say that, despite knowing, I'm usually right. Should I say that tongue in cheek? But being humble is really treating things more as a hypothesis than a given. And figuring out, and this is a cultural thing, figuring out what's the simplest way to test your hypothesis, whether it's a feature or even a process change. And in the manifesto itself, I only discovered this maybe a few years ago. I just noticed it. Like, wow, we really were very humble in even the opening remark about, it's not like we are anointing, the peons with our discovery of the way to do software development. No, we're, it's uncovering. It's still an active voice. By doing it, and I still write code, and by helping others do it, and I still consult, right? It's very humble in even how we set it up. Not to mention the valuing, the items on the left more than the items on the right. That's, some people might call that a little ambiguous, right? I mean, one of the benefits of SAFe is it's extremely prescriptive. Step one, step two, you can find lots of things. Here, we left it fuzzy because welcome to the real world. You got to use your brain. You have to use the context. And, certain times you might need to emphasize one thing over the other. So we leave it to you. And that's, again, is what I would say is a very humble phrasing. And then the core values, I just think, are pragmatic. And as I mentioned, being in the DoD world, there were some things that I wanted to make sure came across in what we were doing here, because as you might imagine, there was a lot of desire to write these crazy documents, which wasn't anything to do with getting results. So that was near and dear to my heart. I learned very quickly that, contract negotiation, that's way too late. You're already lost. So it's much better to build a rapport with the customer than, get into a pissing match over the contract. And then responding to change over following a plan. This was also, classic, not only for the DoD work, but my small engineering company from 95 to 98, we built IBM's next generation manufacturing execution system. And there was something in the statement of work that said, time to put in referential integrity or some goofy thing like that I didn't even remember. We basically were doing an object-oriented approach. The database itself was pretty much just a dumb repository, but they forced us to follow the plan. So what did they gain for that sprint? Or it might have even been a whole month, I forget. But luckily I had heuristics that I took every week. So we could see the only thing that we added was code to the database layer to put in something that we actually. And so we didn't add any new features, didn't add any new value, but we followed the plan. So there you go. So, some of these things were really ingrained into my oh man, this is horrible, prior to me arriving, to the Agile Manifesto gathering. So, and then there's a ton of principles that I won't go into, but those are well worth looking at and thinking and pondering. So you can type into chat here, but if we had to build, let's say web app, produce a product, what are the 3 most important things we need to have on hand?
Folks, you can chat. You can type in the chat, Wayne, if you would like.
Or shout out, come off mute and just say something.
Product vision.
A what?
A vision.
A vision. Yeah, that's a good one. Vision. Yeah. Of course, I've seen plenty of people just churning away without much of a vision, but that's a good start. Requirements. Yeah, those are acceptance criteria are great. Yep. Who it's for. Yep, that's good. Big why, shared understanding of the stakeholder. Yeah. So this is a bit of a trick question, and I apologize for laying the trap. And it seems dopey, but in reality, the emphasis of the people side of the equation is so important. And you've probably heard people, process, and tools. And yeah, you need requirements, you need vision, you need acceptance criteria, and all those things are really important. But in the face of no process, no tools, a core of, I don't know if I've only had a few opportunities in my life to work on truly exceptional kick-ass teams. And it's rare and few and far between, I will say. But it's the damn people. And then, it's not only the people on the team, but, I've worked with great customers and, it's just so amazing. And yeah, process, if you didn't have stuff, if you couldn't read Scrum or, the Agile thing never happened, you create your own process. Good people will, create something to be more effective. And then sometimes even build your own tool. So prior to all the stuff that's freely available now, we, would create our own process and document it, onboard people in it and tweak it. We would even create our own tools, sometimes modeling tools, sometimes crazy testing tools. So people, process, and tools in that order. But I've learned since, I kind of knew this, but I've been saying, and this is even when I sold tools, I don't care. It's the, it's the people really are the most important. And then the mindset is something I've learned over the past few years from Jon Kern. There's a lot more to it than just that simple word. Some might even dispute that word. What does it even mean? But what I mean is there's ways that we make meaning. There's different stages of what we call vertical development, and you can see it in how teams work together or don't. You can see different sort of traits, and so helping the teams learn more about that really can impact the way that they deal with a complex world, which a lot of us are working in. And complex means we can't hold it all in our head. So I've learned a great deal. I call it almost like a secret sauce, or my missing piece. And part of the way to do that is what's known as creating a deliberately developmental environment. Developmental, I don't mean like software development. I mean like mindset development. And that means not chopping someone's head off when something goes awry. And I was really good at that, as I had great bosses. So I kind of stumbled into things that, I was willing to take risks and try stuff and experiment. That's kind of how I learned some of the power of software. I was like, wow, I tried something. It took a 3 or 4 hour manual task, reduced it down to 5 minutes maybe, and was more accurate and better. And I remember the first person I showed it to was like, oh, no, I don't think so, John. We've never done it like that. And I was like, that's not an answer. And I went to a guy who I still see I see both of them every year. We still get together for sort of a retirement, not forget what we call it, but people that I worked with many, many decades ago. And Rich said, oh, well, that looks good. And that was 2 examples that I learned early on of like making it safe for someone to experiment, try something innovative. And Slack is really important for that. And I don't mean the damn tool, because if anything, that's the anti-Slack. Slack is the anti-Slack. If you want to not be able to innovate, just keep Slack on. So at any rate, it's super important, because Agile is really easy. I mean, simple, but it's not really very easy. It's hard to do this because of, I like to joke, all the people. But speaking of all the people and what causes things to be, especially the larger you get, I call it, I don't know, silo trap. Cooperation is not the same as collaboration. Cooperation is someone throws it over the wall or passes it along. And what I see all too often, and this, it's really hard for me to, I have way more depth inside my mind than I'm able to express when I see this, but I see too much work being done too far in advance to too great of a level, because it's the UX designer has to do all the UX, or the requirements have to be all done before we can sign off. All this malarkey that is, it's safe, it's easy, but it's not very effective at delivering the most bang for the least amount of effort. So to me, it's all about treating your world much more as a system, treating things holistically, understanding that there's a lot of interconnectedness, and working more together as like a team sport to deliver value. And it's not a process. I like to say it's very personal. Agile starts with me, and from my yoga instructors, your yogis, never a master, always a student. You work in the body you have, and mine's not very flexible. But it's the same thing with Agile, in my opinion. It's not checking the box that we're following some process. It's not for someone else. Management shouldn't tell the teams to get Agile if they're not. Right? Transformation isn't for someone else to do. It starts with me. So it's really important, I think, to really treat Agile as a state of mind, a way of being, and not just some process in a book. So I think I did that in 20 minutes. Try to be fast.
Well, John, thank you for doing this. It's been great, folks. This means that the floor is now going to be open for longer for you to ask questions and engage with John. So please go ahead and ask questions. I do actually have one pressing question from a few weeks back when we had Bob Martin, Uncle Bob, speaking. I wanted to validate something with you, and he said, absolutely do it with John. But let me go last or later. So the floor is open, folks. Any questions for John?
Hi, John. Madeline here. Hi, question
Hi,
for you. What? It's been more than 20 years, right? Since you co-wrote the Agile Manifesto. What are some of the ways that you see us losing the plot under the guise of Agile, right?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of what I call Agile in name only, if that's kind of what you mean by losing. I think you said losing the plot.
Mhm.
Yeah, I really just want people to kind of, I don't want to say return to basics, maybe start with the basics, because I think I sort of checked out of the Agile world partway through, and I said, screw it. Good luck, y'all. You know, I'm just going to go work with teams and build fun stuff and build fun teams. And, you know, like I'm tired of trying to, you know, shout at clouds or, you know, shout into the wind, because I saw a lot of, and it's natural, and, you know, it to each their own. But I think there's a lot that gets left out when there's so much emphasis on process for process sake, not really understanding, you know, what were we battling at the time, you know, in terms of heavyweight process. SAFe looks a lot like RUP. I got no issues with SAFe. Like I probably have, let's see if I can. Yeah, I probably have some SAFe diagram somewhere that, you know, this, one of these things, and I could blindly point to something and go, oh yeah, system demos. I got no problem with that, you know, because they borrowed from Agile and Lean, and what could be wrong? And it's like RUP. It's a beautiful reference, and they're more power to them. Like, people put a lot of time and energy in there, and I think it helps a lot of people. But it's really easy to just get lost in that forest and forget about, wait, what are we trying to do again? What's value? I forget. So anyway, that's a long-winded way to say, yeah, I think there's a lot that's fallen off the operating room floor or whatever. Dave has his hand up.
Hi, great presentation. As far as like the federal space, so what I have seen in at least in the distant past is, you know, if you have a solution to something that you're working on, you pretty much can't get it done until that work has gone through, let's say, like a CCB, and you know, and it gets approved, because otherwise and I'm sure you know this term, it's called working at risk. So what I've seen is that even though in that space they say they want to be agile, what it really comes down to is the development teams might be running agile or some hybrid form of waterfall and agile, but the entire organization is not agile, because you basically, the problem is that you have to come into compliance. And that compliance stuff starts, you know, at the very, very highest levels. And so you have to work within that system and do the best you can. I mean, that's the issue.
Yeah, and that's, you know, that's a great point. I often say, you know, Agile can be done in the context within which you're dealt. And, you know, whether you've got more compliance issues for HIPAA or PCI, you know, for personally identifiable information, or for money, you know, way different than like my firefighting app. There's no money in there. There's no PII in there, right? So I get away with a lot. The idea is to handle it in the most agile way possible. I guess that's the best thing that I can say. And yeah, the old change control board. One thing I loved about RUP, and probably SAFe, it was a great, like, people would send RFPs and stuff like that for weird acronyms. I could usually find them in one of those wonderful document, like CCB, I think you probably meant change control board and all that wonkiness. And, sometimes if you can't, now it's not just in federal, right? I mean, this happens in large organizations. They have there's one group we were helping, and after did a bit of a value stream, didn't take too long. Like we snuck it in 8 1-hour meetings, a little painful, but nonetheless, it's like, hey, here you go. You took 8 months to decide to do 8 weeks worth of work. There's your problem. WTF? Don't whip the ponies to code twice as fast, because that's not the issue. So, it happens in large organizations too, where they have all these wickets. And I think, part of it at what I did was in DoD land was better to beg forgiveness than ask permission. And I often say, what's the cheapest thing you can do to satisfy that, what might be a low return on investment activity, and try to, so that's, I think my attitude has always been try to do the best thing for the customer, despite all the things that are in the way. And yeah, but you do have to try to knock down those roadblocks if you can.
Yeah, and a lot of their budgets are in a lot of cases done 2 years in advance.
Yeah.
So there's such a lag, right? And whether we like it or not, we're all affected by those budgets. And so it becomes very challenging to work within that situation in an agile manner, because your job and yourself are really at the mercy of those budgets that are just years off.
Yeah, that's definitely crazy town, that's for sure.
And some of the budgeting process will, be done by especially program managers will start to fractionalize people. And so you've got somebody on a scrum team at 20%, somebody at 30%, your PO is at 10%.
Yeah, that's awesome. I experienced that one board that I showed, now that I stopped sharing. The one board that I showed, that was the manuals, post, sticky notes and index cards. That was in a group where, I wonder if I have a bigger picture of it. Yeah, I do. That was in a group, whoops, where I got fractional. It was hilarious because I'd never seen it in real life before. I grew up doing engineering and Gantt charts and all that kind of crap. And then I hit software and I tried it for the first time. I was like, okay, this is like this is insanity. You can't drive software like that. It's just a to-do list. So get over that kind of resource leveling and all that crap. But I witnessed it firsthand because a DBA shows up, a UX designer shows up, and they are partial. And they tell me, okay, I'm going to be here, these number of half days a week, because I'm dedicated, 4/10. Or, I was like, wow, this is hilarious. I mean, this is literally fractional people on a team. And I'd never thought about that before, but it certainly is reality. So we worked, number one, with the DBA. I said, look, I've been doing SQL since you were knee-high to a grasshopper. I accidentally learned it when I was using this other cool tool. So we're actually not going to need you until we need you. So, the things like that. I'm smart enough. I'm not an expert in anything, but I'm smart enough to know when I need an expert. So that was another funny aspect of that being in that situation, where a Gantt chart and resources materialized right before my bare eyes as partials. So yeah, it's hard.
And I think that's kind of one of the most destructive things when I talk to people, developers especially, and they say, I hate Agile. One of the things that I probe at and they give me is, but you say one thing and do another. So I tell them, we're all about focus here, but for 30% of the time, and then 70% of the time you can take your focus elsewhere. And developers especially can smell that kind of BS a mile away, and they won't go along with it. It's one of the big resistance patterns I keep seeing is you say one thing and you do another, and I've recognized that, and now I'm not going to do anything.
Yeah, another funny story was good friends of mine called me up. I worked with them back in the late 90s. my company helped their company. I started TogetherSoft at that time and kind of left my own company, but my colleagues were still working with this company. They worked at a pump manufacturer, then they created a company. And then, 13 years later, my friend calls up and says, "Hey, I think I had that thing that your blog, that technical debt thing. I think I got some of that. Can we go drink some beer?" And so, yeah, sure. And so I went, started working with them. And what's really kind of, I don't know, maybe a little crazy is how quickly, like, you could see what I would say the manifestation of multiple teams working in, sort of independently, creating this cluster, to put it politely. And yeah, I mean, some of the stuff that they were doing was so fractured. I will say they were very nice people, very, God-fearing and very gentle, not a lot of swear words, if any, around the office. And one of the meetings where we're discussing something a little contentious, I stood up, kind of dramatically, maybe gently pounded the table, said, "I'm going to drop the F word here, the F bomb." And like, eyes super big. And I said, "What we need is focus." Because yeah, there was, it is crazy because a lot of times, the mistake of doing too much activity for limited progress and you're not focused is, what's the fastest way to do 6 things? Not starting 6 in a, at the same time. Sorry, it's like 1 at a time. And you're right. Simple things are so hard to sometimes make companies see. There's a question I saw. Let's see.
Tim, Franz, Olvi. Please don't.
Hey, Gene, if you're talking, I can't hear you. I don't know if others can.
It was faint. What if people on the team feel like?
Oh, yeah, it's my mic. Moses, question from Moses. John, can you hear me?
Yes.
What do you start with a team that already practices agile anti-patterns, but actually realizes it and are now resistant to change? So
And then there's a don't. So they don't practice. You
Yeah.
can
come off mute and explain, Moses. If you're there still.
Sure. Sorry, it was the question was how do you deal with a team that's already practicing agile anti-patterns? So they think they work in an agile way, but they practice anti-patterns and they've been doing it for a long time. You realize it. Let's say you come in as a developer or as a scrum master or as a product owner, whatever it is. You realize it, but they don't realize it. How do you deal? Where do you start with that?
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? I guess, I don't understand some things that I witness with teams I work with. And I think you've probably tried the normal things of maybe pointing it out, but one thing that could help that we have done with a lot of teams is get a small cross-functional group together that's working on that value stream. So you get, at least a handful of representative people. It doesn't have to be everybody, 10 or 15 people, maybe at most, to go through the value stream and talk about how do we work. And then what's kind of crazy, you'll see if this shows up. Can you see something that looks like a Miro board right now? So, things like, all right, what's the flow? What are reverse flows? Do you have kind of any sort of metrics on how often these reverse flow happens? And then try to appeal to everyone's notion of, yeah, we're trying to get value out the door as effectively as possible, maybe some of these practices should be, looked at as potential, maybe we don't do testing, like I as a developer, a lot of times I see folks who, there's coders way better than me. Maybe their code doesn't need to be tested, but I'm not that confident. So I get a lot more confident when I have my kind of a test-driven approach, and especially behavior-driven approach, where I actually use BDD, I use Gherkin even for pseudo acceptance criteria, in the issue, and then how we actually code it. So that you might find from a value stream exercise where some practices are failing to help the team deliver value effectively. So I don't know, like it's hard, right? I often joke, and I've already said it once today, that software would be easy if it weren't for all the people. But people are the most important.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One of the things that I try to do in that area, because I've seen that quite a lot, is to ask the team to try something new and also mix in there like one-on-ones with various people, especially people who are quote unquote problematic, I guess. If you sort of try to approach it from that standpoint, they may be more open to it, versus if you quote the Scrum guide and tell them they need to do it, that in general is just not going to work. But just to say, hey, why don't we, Agile's all about experimentation. Why don't we just try this and see if it's better, and we deliver more with better quality than what we had before. So that's how I approach that.
Yeah, and that gets back to even the process, treat it as a hypothesis. So why don't we try this for a month and see what happens? To me, work has always been subsidized learning. Like I'm going to do stuff all the time on the company's dime to both advance myself, but at the, in the direction of helping advance the project, the team, so yeah, that's great advice. Let's try it. It's not a death sentence. It's not a life sentence. Let's just try it.
Hey, John, thank you for this. So we got only a couple minutes, so I wanted to, diversify a little bit. There was a question was from France and from Kim. Kim may just go off on mute and ask, but Francis was, what if people on the team feel like they don't have the capacity to innovate within Scrum because the sprints bind them to deliver on sprint plan? So, do you want to give Franz your response, John?
Yeah. Well, like I can understand sprints early on, but if you stand back and it's, I think, good to even question, why are we still doing sprints? Is it to coordinate? Because that's a built-in delay, right? And I get it. It might be hard to deliver things more rapidly. There might all kinds of reasons, but what I would suggest is, the type of innovation, I guess, if it's along innovating on process, innovating on features, innovating on design and architecture, maybe commit to less, have some spare capacity. That's really, I think what I think happens a lot is I see people like reporting their vacation time and like, oh my God, if you have to care about like that's like, come on, what are we doing? I don't know. I don't even know a good analogy.
All right, crazy enough. Yeah. Folks, John, we got like 2 minutes remaining, literally, because we need to wrap up a few minutes before the hour. I'm gonna selfishly execute the right to ask the last question because it's a lingering from the previous session we had with Uncle Bob. Back in 2001, when you all got together, I think the word adaptive essentially it's in there. It's rooted in the name of the company you work for at the moment, right? Adaptivist. So the word adaptive was the numero uno candidate, and then Agile was selected over adaptive for other reasons. Could you talk just a little bit about that? Because for a layman person, when we strip the word Agile from all of the banners out there, I think it will be a lot of vacuum. So many people are anchored to this word without really understanding what it means synonymously.
Yeah, I know the thing that I recollect, one of the beauties about the gathering is most of us, I don't think any one of us has full recollection with any great confidence, which is a testament, I think, to the gathering itself, that it's a lot of things are fuzzy. My recollection is we were gathering under lightweight processes, lightweight methodologists. And I say it was Alistair, but I don't know. My recollection was he said, I don't want to be known as a lightweight anything. That's not a cool word to be a lightweight, and as I said, I was doing Agile enhanced fighter maneuverability research, like post-stall maneuvers, X-31 flight simulation. So I don't know if I thought Agile made sense, or Martin said the word Agile or Agile. I forget where it came from, frankly, but it made a lot of sense because what we're talking about is instead of being like a big aircraft carrier or a bomber, we're more like a fighter or a small, speedboat, way more agile, way more nimble, way more able to adapt and change to the circumstances on the ground. So, my recollection was we just wanted something better than lightweight. Like that was a non-starter. I don't remember adaptive at all. Could have been said. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that certainly helps. It's another layer of perception. So it all.
Yeah, and Mike, I remember at the 10th anniversary, someone's asking about Mike Beadle. Yeah, riding the chairlift with him. We had a lot of fun together. Yeah, it's a real pity what happened.
Yeah,
Poor Mike.
Indeed. Sure. Well, I would like to wrap up on a good note. First of all, I want to thank you personally for coming out and speaking with the community. That's a great thing to do. Always to give back to the community and for people. Hopefully they enjoyed and saw value getting some content from one of the people that was there initially, authentically in 2001, putting together the manifesto. And your great work that you have done and have been doing, hopefully people will make a note of it. If they need to reach out to you directly, if they do want to do so, they can do on LinkedIn. I'm sure you're pretty transparent. And folks, I want to thank you all. So John, personally, I want to thank you for doing this and taking the time, the hour out of your daily schedule. Folks, thank you all for joining. You will be able to find this recording along with John's content probably sometime later today on the link that I shared from before, and I'll ping it again in the chat along with so the link is coming up. Thank you for coming. Be safe, be well, and keep coming back for great events. And once again, John is fully transparent and very available on LinkedIn. I just want to make sure you have direct access to him. You don't have to go through me.
Yeah, and I'll just say, I'm happy to talk to you and your team and your company. Just reach out. I freely give my time, a lot. So
yep,
happy to help you however I can.
Absolutely. Please do so, folks. Once again, thank you. Have a great day ahead of you, and we'll wrap it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gene. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.